Prynawn da chi, good afternoon to you. You're listening live to the Wales Audit Office in the Cathedral Road in Cardiff. Mae'r gwebinar yma'n dod fyw o Cathedral Road yng Nghaerdydd. Y gwebinar yw Caffael cynaliadwy. So, croeso cynnes i chi. Dwi'n Una Lloyd, dwi'n rhan o'r tîm yn barod da yn Swyddog Chwilio Cymru. I'm Una Lloyd and part of the Good Practice team from the Wales Audit Office. I think it's really important I introduce you to my colleagues behind the camera because I'll be chatting quite a lot to them. So Michelle is doing all things technical. Prynawn da, Michelle. Hello. Good afternoon. Gito, prynawn da ti, siw ti?
Prynawn da, iawn diolch.
Gito is going to be on Twitter this afternoon, and then the lovely Sarah is going to be very busy on our email account and Google Hangouts. Good afternoon, Sarah.
Hi.
Lovely. Okie dokie. So I need you to grab a pen, because I'm sure you'll have lots of questions and observations to share. So let me tell you what the hashtag is. So the hashtag is WAO Procure, WAO Procure. That's our hashtag on Twitter. If you want to email us any questions or observations, it's good.practice@audit.wales. That's good.practice@audit.wales. On Google Hangouts, if you happen to have a Google Hangout account, please feel free to sort of actually log on, because Sarah, you're going to pick up anything on the Google Hangout hashtag. That's great. That's brilliant. Okie dokie. So, questions and observations. I always tell this to all delegates to listen in to any of our webinars. Your observations and questions are really important. So, some people are quite uncomfortable about sort of sending questions in. It's about your questions, so I guarantee you anonymity. We'd much prefer to have the questions, so don't worry about and have any concerns about that at all. So now that you've met the people behind the team, let's meet the panel who are in front of the team. How would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Diolch Una. Caffael ydw i, dwi'n gweithio swyddfa Comisiynydd Cenedlaethau'r dyfodol. My name is Caffael. I work for the Office of the Future Generations Commission for Wales.
Chris Cynnes, hello Neil, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Would you care to introduce yourself to people listening in today?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Neil McEnroy. I'm the Chief Executive of the Centre for Local Economic Strategies and with the UK's leading member and research organisation dedicated to progressive economics for people in place.
Progressive. I think we'll be picking up on a few of that word today, so thank you. Very welcome, Neil. And last but not least, prynawn da ti, Mari?
Diolch yn fawr, prynawn da. Fi'n Mari Arthur, fi'n dod o Cynnal Cymru, Sustain Wales. I'm the Director of the National Charity for Sustainable Development in Wales.
Mari, croeso cynnes iawn I chi, croeso. Now, Trish was hoping to be with us here today. Trish is from Melin Homes. Unfortunately, she can't be with us. But what we will do, we'll catch up with Trish in the next couple of weeks. We'll grab her thoughts on video and we'll share them with you if that's okay. So, you've had who's behind the camera, who's in front of the camera. So, who's out there then? Let me give you a bit of a flavour for people who are listening in today. So, we've got people from various universities across the UK, local government in Wales, Welsh Government, we've got housing associations, Estyn, we've got various health bodies, fire and rescue services, devolved bodies such as Natural Resources Wales, Qualification Wales, WCVA, Wales Co-op Centre, a number of different representative bodies for the public and private sector. And also we've got some environmental consultants who are working with public services from Scotland, England, Ireland and Northern Ireland as well. You're all very welcome. The interesting thing, we were having a quick chat before we started this afternoon, and the roles that we've got of people listening are quite diverse, and we're finding this really interesting and very promising as well, because we haven't got just procurement people listening in. We've got people who are policy development, commissioning, critical, partnership roles, critical. Then there's other procurement roles as well. There's the sustainability roles, procurement management, planning, performance, social value, and strategic funding governance. So you're all very welcome this afternoon. Don't wait for me to give you a shout out, say, right, time to post your questions. You can post your questions anytime you like. And I'll just remind you what it is again. If you're on Twitter, can you go against the hashtag of WAO Procure? If you fancy doing it by email, just email your observations in at good.practice@audit.wales. So, I'd like to turn to Irgain now. Irgain, sustainable procurement. From the Future Generations Office point of view, why are we starting with this topic today? What's the story behind it?
We feel that the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act really provides the opportunity to transform the way we think about procurement in Wales and the way that we do procurement. We feel that the Act is a really helpful framework to help public bodies to think differently and to challenge business as usual. So procurement is one of the 7 core areas that are listed in the statutory guidance that sits alongside the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And public bodies have a duty to demonstrate how they're changing the way that they procure so that it is in line with the requirements of the Act. And we think that this should be seen as a real opportunity to use the power of the 6 billion spend to procure goods and services in a way that contributes to improving social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being in Wales as the Act requires. So I think we need to look at how procurement can support the delivery of wider wellbeing objectives. So, for example, around supporting and developing the local economy, supporting your environmental objectives, as well as looking at improving skills and social value.
Thank you very much indeed. True to your word, there's questions already coming in here, folks. So I'm letting the panel know there's some questions going to be coming in about skills front. So, but before that, let's ask the panel a question I wanted to kick off, because you're all 3 of you from 3 very different perspectives. So I'd love to know what your take is on sustainable procurement and how does it relate to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Now, Neil, Scotsman living in England, in north of Manchester, what's your take on sustainable procurement?
Well, the thing about procurement and the public spend, which is really important to get over here, is that that's our money. It's the Welsh people's money. So that's £6 billion. We need to make sure that the value of that money is extracted as much as possible in social and economic and cultural and environmental terms. And what progressive procurement does is that
it's already coming in that term, progressive procurement.
Indeed, what it does, it seeks to maximise that benefit of that spend. And you could argue, of course, it's a dereliction of duty if you don't do progressive procurement, because after all, it's our money. And I think the other thing that's worth mentioning here is progressive procurement, for my organisation, the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, sits within a broader mission here of wealth building. We see that democratic pound, that procurement spend, is part of a wider mission to try and make an economy that works for all and works for places. An economy that's less extractive in terms of wealth and much more generative. And that £6 billion is low-hanging fruit, if I can call it that, in terms of making sure that is generative in social, economic, and cultural, environmental terms for the places and people of Wales.
That's a good way to be starting off. Neil, thank you very much. Thank you. So, Mari, from Canal Cymru's point of view, your perspective is going to be slightly different, isn't it? So what's your thought on what sustainable procurement means?
Well, I do agree with Neil, and I think sustainable procurement is it's a practical opportunity which can have a huge impact on making Wales a truly sustainable nation. And I feel that the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act gives us the framework on which to do things better, and permission, as a few people have said, gives us permission now to get it right. I think we've got an opportunity to build stronger, more competitive economies, local economies in Wales. We seem to have been given a bit of a blank slate now, where we can start to use the Act in a positive way to have a big impact on the way we work. And the traditional frameworks that a lot of the bigger organisations adhere to, I think, is a good opportunity to work with a number of organisations out there in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Office to see how you can improve the way you've always done things.
Okay. So, Irgain, from the Future Generations Office, what's your take on why sustainable procurement?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think the Act does provide us with a framework to help us to think about these things differently and to make sure that our actions that follow are done in a different way. I very much agree with Mari and Neil's point around considering the money that we spend and how we spend it, and indeed the idea that that can bring so much more in terms of a wider value for people and the economy in Wales, that we don't just focus on spending the money and spending it in a very sort of traditional and linear way, but really thinking about, through spending that money, all those wider outcomes that can be achieved.
Okay, Irgain, thank you. I've obviously hit a little litmus paper when it comes to talking about skill sets. There's 3 questions already come in purely just on skill sets. So let me get this one out first, and then I'll come up onto the other one. So it's a general question panel. So the question is, has Wales got the skills to deliver what we need in terms of sustainable procurement? Are we talking about new skills, different skills? Could you clarify what we're talking about here, if that's all right? That's the first one. Neil, can you come up with something for me on that one, if that's all right?
Surely, obviously I'm not from Wales and don't know the capabilities or capacity of procurement officers and commissioners to act progressively when it comes to spending public money, but it seems to me that it's not really a difficult skill set here. This is about behaviours. This is about appropriate. You've got a great act. The act should prompt, creates a platform for progressive behaviours in terms of how you procure and commission activities. I think it's much more of a value set, perhaps, rather than a specific set of technical skills. The technical elements of procurement is all there in terms of setting out tenders and making sure the tenders comply with certain wider social aspirations. It's a behaviour set and a mindset that's important here. And that mindset, again, repeat myself, I suppose, but it's that every single pound that you spend out of the public purse needs to look at those wider social, economic, environmental and cultural aims and outcomes. And that is much more a behaviour set and a mindset, rather than something relating to skills of procurement officers or for commissioners. I would add, though, that commissioning departments and commissioning agents, they need to understand that when they are procuring a good and service or want a particular service, that they commission with this wider progressive element in mind. And that sometimes is not what they just want directly to get that good or service and don't think about that wider ripple effect. So perhaps there's a little bit of skill there, I suppose, in terms of that wider understanding of the commissioning organisation or department.
Mari, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, and just picking up on that point, I think there's an opportunity now to do a lot more partnership working, within procurement departments as well as out there in delivery. I think we are a country of small to medium-sized businesses on the whole, and I think it's an opportunity for the PSBs, the public service boards, and the 44 public bodies that are liable to the Act to help maybe develop that partnership working, to maybe create some platforms where we don't need to, or we don't automatically think we need to look outside of Wales to deliver some of the major contracts. I think we have an opportunity within our own organisations and to procure goods and services by building partnership working in a more active way. So we're helping to support the delivery of that. And I think the tools and the skills are there to do that. I think it is a behaviour change, a cultural change that we need to all invest in. I think it's not an easy way of working for us because it's not a traditional way of working. But I think once we start to go down that road, then it'll become much easier because we're sharing that knowledge.
Before I bring you in, Irgain, there's a couple of there's a question I'd like to add before you respond. It says, on the skills front, it's a bit of a challenge question. I like these questions. Sorry, the panel is probably going to be getting uncomfortable now, so bear with me. So on the skills front, the biggest problem is the lack of CIPS qualified staff. So comments are barely more than 200 ? qualified professionals in the Welsh public sector when there should be at least 300 given the £1 to 1 to 15 million principle. How is this to be overcome? So in talking about skills, but you've talked now about culture and a mindset. This question is specifically about qualified professionals. Would you care to comment? Can, do you want to pick up on this one, or do you want to pick up on the last one?
I was just going to elaborate on the previous question around skills. We know that if we are to achieve the vision that's set out in the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, that we need to see significant culture change across the public sector in Wales. So that doesn't just come down to how procurement is done, but that comes down to how, you know, all services are delivered in Wales. So I think that is a big challenge for us. And, you know, as the Future Generations Commissioner's Office, we don't underestimate that challenge for public bodies, and we realise that we need to do a lot of kind of sharing of learning and capacity building, and, you know, supporting each other on the journey. So coming back to, you know, have we got the skills we need? I mean, given that the Act requires public bodies to think about long-term and futures issues as well, you know, we don't even know really what skills we are likely to need possibly in 10 or even 20 years' time. So coming back to today, you know, I think we do have the right skills in the public sector, but what we need to make sure is that the procurement people, or the staff that work purely in the procurement profession, that they are allowed space to work far more collaboratively with, you know, colleagues within their own organisations, as well as organisations that are external to them. Because I think it's by bringing that mix of people together that you tend to get those more innovative, those more creative ideas around how procurement can be done differently. So I think for far too long, procurement has really been seen as, you know, something that happens, you know, in this part of the organisation, that they feel quite detached and isolated sometimes. And I think we need to give them permission to really start working with others a lot more. Coming back to the specific question on the training and the skills, I mean, I've heard that raised in previous within the Public Accounts Committee inquiry, I think. So it clearly is an issue, I think, for the staff who work within the procurement profession. So I don't think I have, you know, the answers to that today, but I think it's something that, you know, maybe we need to work with others to see what can be done around that.
I would say we need to make a difference between procurement skills, which is the technical aspect of procuring goods and services, and the wider commissioning skills for wider well-being. And I think there's a confluence of both of them required. I would say, though, that I'm not denying there might be a need for better procurement skills, but what I would say is, let's not go down that route. I mean, it's, you know, too heavily, because it's a recipe for procrastination. It strikes me that commissioners in the public service need to be imbued with a sense and a culture that everything they do has wider well-being as their objectives, and that could be sort of skills development. But it seems to me, if you're working in the public sector and you're not thinking about wider well-being, you're in the wrong job, frankly. So I'm not sure this is really. There might be some things we need to improve on skills, but I think it's much more about behaviour, a consciousness and awareness of that every single pound needs to be extracted to the maximum benefit for well-being.
And on that, I think, as been touched on, I think it does need to be a whole organisation commitment to procurement as well. And I know that Trish, who couldn't be here from Million Homes, they're one of our members. Procurement now sits under her, and she was head of sustainability and has taken over procurement to make sure it's embedded within the whole thinking of the organisation. So there are specific skills you need, but I think we have to remember that it's more inclusive. I think it's a new way of working and involving the whole organisation.
And Trish would have said that. Before we move on to the next observation, I'd actually like to ask you who are listening out there who are in procurement, what's your thoughts and observations what the panel have just shared? If you've got any ideas in terms of, because this is about trying to gather knowledge from as wide as possible. Are you doing something different in terms of skills development and capacity building? Let us know. We'd love to be able to share that, if that's all right. Okay, Neil, are you feeling comfortable? Because
Yeah,
I've got a really nice comment to share back with you. So it's about the term progressive procurement. The observation is progressive procurement requires progressive officials. This person's not convinced yet that we have the latter. So what I'd like to take from that is, when you talk about progressive procurement, what would be the behaviours that we'd like to see demonstrated in this? I think that's where I'd like to take this.
Yeah, again, I don't know specific in Wales. It seems to me that in other places we work, including dozens of places across England and with the Scottish Government and across Europe on this whole idea of progressive procurement. There is something in the DNA of a place that's important in terms of a progressive mindset that comes from politicians and from senior officials and in the DNA of an organisation itself. And that needs to flow through an organisation. And the question might be implying there isn't that mindset in Wales. What I know of Wales is that it's full of progressive people. So I would say that it is a progressive land, and I have a sense of progressive people. Maybe what's not good, maybe what's not as effective is that lining things up, perhaps, and maybe the forcefulness of some of that progressive ideas of what this nation is and what it should be doing as what it should be doing in different localities. So the upshot of this, as I'm saying, is that I think this is a progressive place. I think it's about leadership making progressive statements and seeing procurement as a key plank of that. I think for too long, procurement's been seen as a technical act. It's an act of well-being. It's a progressive social act. It's a progressive economic act. And politicians need to see it. It's not just about doing something in an efficient way or something that's a technical exercise that's not for them. It's actually core business for them if they believe in economic and social justice in Wales. It's one of the key levers they have in their, one of the key tools they have in their toolbox to actually have aspirations for a more inclusive and more just Wales.
I'd just like to pick up your point about the DNA of an organisation. And in Cynnal Cymru, we're trying to work with our members at the moment to change the DNA of organisations by making them responsible to their communities. And one of the ways we're trying to do that is to encourage organisations to support staff becoming trustees in third sector organisations. It sounds simple, but what it does is it puts their teams in the community, and it changes the whole way the organisation thinks then when you feel responsible for that community. So you feel more ownership of decisions because you know the impact that they're going to have, and it's more of a two-way relationship with your communities. And I think if that becomes a way of working where there's time afforded to staff members to sit on boards in third sector organisations in communities across Wales, then that information from the community is going to come back up the chain and inform decisions in the organisation, as well as have professionals within that organisation give their skill sets to people who are working on the ground as well. I think that is a way of slowly changing the DNA of an organisation as well, which will make more progressive thinking because they'll see the impact it's having on the ground. And I also think it's a stronger way to build local economies throughout Wales.
Lovely, thank you. There's a couple of questions coming in relation to governance. Can I hold those two questions until into the middle section, if that's okay, because it's far more pertinent there. We've had a couple of observations in from people who are commissioning. One observation is that we are starting to change the way we are, our approach to commissioning. We are becoming less siloed. One of the challenges we actually have is that we are trying to seek support and direction from our senior managers in terms of stopping this silo working. Does the panel have any advice or support to try and help us, guide us through we see this as the right way of working, but senior managers are not there yet? Interesting observation. Can I just say that's come, I think it's fair for me to say that's come from health, but I'm sure this is indicative for a number of different public services. So obviously these people in commissioning, delegates who are in commissioning, are seeing the light in terms of this is the way forward. So it's a bottom-up approach. What support could we give them, or direction could we give them in terms of to try and make sure that it's a two-way coming up?
I can put that. You know, yeah. I think we're bedeviled in public sector over recent years, where investment, spending is seen as a cost. Everything we spend is a cost, but actually it's an investment in now, investment in our future. And what we have at a senior level in our public services is a sense that we need to do things more efficiently and we need to do things more cheaply. But actually, and I understand that pressure from a fiscal point of view, from an organisational funding point of view, but actually it's short-sighted because we need to think about our public services and what we spend in the public services as an investment. You know, so for instance, spending money on early years is not a cost, it's an investment in our future and the future productivity of our country. And so I think we need to just provide a context at a national level that eases back on this constant drive for efficiencies in the short term and looks at longer term effectiveness, which actually accrues greater savings in the longer term. So if you're investing early years and you spend money now, you don't see it as a cost. You see it as an investment in the future in the unborn child. If you invest in early years or motherhood or parenthood, that means then that child will be brought up in a more secure environment and they're less likely to put more demands on the public services further down the line. So there is a shift in the culture of our public services, which moves away from seeing everything as a cost and efficiencies and more towards seeing it as an investment. And that again needs to come from the top, and it's part of the corporate culture that Madam was talking about.
Yeah.
Can I just, Gitter, can you tweet out for me the expression Neil started off by saying that how did you say that expression? Investment is seen as a cost is seen as an investment. Have I got that right or wrong?
Public services are seen as a cost, but actually they're an investment.
Sort of, what are people's thoughts and observations on that one?
And I just think that you said everything I wanted to say, but the two small points I just wanted to add. One was we've got the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act now, which does help us to gives us permission to work differently. We have to look for the long term. We have to evidence that we've got long-term thinking and that we're partnership working, and that goes within an organisation, not just external. And I think there are some good examples out there as well that you can draw upon to show the success that other organisations and other countries have had by doing it differently.
Can I just add to that? I think that specific question does relate to previous points that we were talking about around how, do we have the progressive procurement behaviours in the public sector? Because if we've got procurement staff who are clearly seeing how their roles can deliver and how their roles are very much aligned to the wider corporate objectives of their organisation, and that that they can show that, then I think that is a really strong message to share upwards to their senior management team, that they are making that link and that connection upwards to the wider objectives. And I think my advice back to them would be, take the framework, of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and show how you are following the 5 ways of working. We've picked up on a lot of them already. So how are you thinking about the long term? How are you collaborating, integrating, involving, preventing, etc.? And how are you showing your contribution to the 7 national wellbeing goals? And I think by communicating the work that you're doing in that way, I think that would probably send a really powerful message up to your senior managers.
So I hope you're getting the idea. You are part of this webinar. I will often chuck some questions back at you for thoughts and observations. So I'm going to ask you, do you think that you're getting there in terms of being a progressive procurement, sustainable procurement sort of delivery unit within your own organisation or within your partnership group, whatever it is? If you are, would you like to share it with me so we can sort of start sharing these stories out? It'd be really, really helpful. Sort of happy just to share your thoughts. I'm not going to mention who your organisation is. I just want to see the starting of it, because we're hearing there are some starting up, but let's hear the stories. We're happy to share them out now. If not now, if we run out of time today, we will share these with you later on, if that's all right. Neil, you are in the hot seat. So I'm also going to bring you in on this, Irgain, if that's all right. It's saying wider well-being is not understood. Typically, the cost and compliance is to the fore, not the value in inverted commas. It requires political leadership. And the example that's given here is Matthew Brown in Preston, but I'm sure there are a number of others we could actually bring in. So that's obviously someone trying to sort of get to the wider understanding of well-being. So I'd love your thoughts on what sort of, do you think wider well-being is not understood?
I think it's an interesting question, and I think what we're talking about here, and it's also alluding to the work we did in Preston, is one example of, we have a few success around progressive procurement, of many. But the thing here is that there's lots of language bandied around. You know, we've got well-being, we've now got inclusive growth, we've previously had social justice or tackling poverty.
So what do we really mean by that?
Well, in essence, what we're talking about here is decency and a sense of fraternity and solidarity with our fellow human beings. And you can say any language you want. What's important about this here is not necessarily the language or leadership as such. What's important is to get started and show the benefits of, say, a progressive procurement regime. Showcase it, sing about it. Good singers in Wales. Sing about it, amplify it, scale it up. These are the ways that you create the change. Semantic debates of what we call it, or people not understanding well-being. Well, get out there and show us where there's well-being being done by progressive procurement. And there's examples across this land right now. We could fill a room. We could fill this room full of examples. Get that down, showcase it, amplify it, and then leadership will pick up on it, and other bits of the community will pick up on it. I think it's a confluence of many things, but I would say let's get going, let's showcase what we've got, and that will create the momentum behind this sorts of stuff. If we're waiting for political leadership, no matter how good the political leadership is, they'll be using their own language. Somebody won't like them because of some other reason. A human story is the best thing we can do. And that's the example from Preston, I think, that's happened. Started off small things happen. It snowballs. It's snowballing.
Thank you. So, are you going to take Neil's offer up? Share with us your stories. We'll happily share them for you. Thanks for that.
Can I just add to that point, Tina? I'm assuming that question has come from somebody outside of Wales?
No, inside Wales.
Inside of Wales. Okay, that's interesting, because again, we have, through the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, we have 7 national wellbeing goals for Wales, which are defined very clearly within the legislation: prosperous Wales, resilient Wales, a healthy Wales, globally responsible Wales. So, you know, if people feel that wellbeing isn't clear for us in Wales, then I would recommend that they go and have a look at those definitions as a starting point. Then we've got the 44 public bodies who have all set their own wellbeing objectives. So if the question has come from someone who works for one of those 44 public bodies, then go and have a look at the wellbeing objectives that your organisation has set. And again, we've got the public services boards working together. They've got wellbeing plans for their local areas. So I think, you know, again, you know, agreeing with Neil very much, you know, that we can argue this till the cows come home, really, but, you know, we are hopefully getting a better sense of what well-being does mean for us in Wales.
Thank you very much. Before I bring you in, Mary, if I may, Gito, can you tweet out the link to the 7 wellbeing goals from the Future Generations Office, just to share? Because I am aware we've got people from outside Wales listening in, and they won't be so familiar with the Act, so we can't make the assumption. So we're going to share that out if that's okay. Mary, do you want to close section 1?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on one wider wellbeing issue following the Joseph Rowntree Foundation report this morning. We're a decade on from the financial crisis, and in Wales we've still got more people living in poverty that are in work than out of work, and I think there is an obligation on us all, especially when we're spending public money, to make sure everyone in that supply chain, including the people right at the bottom, usually the ones delivering projects and contracts on the ground, are paid enough to get themselves out of poverty. And as the living wage accrediting body for Wales, it's the personal mission of ours in Cynnal Cymru to drive the living wage forward in Wales. And I think that should be at the heart of public procurement in Wales.
Okay. Gito, just to make sure that everyone's aware of the living wage, what's the website address so Gito can tweet it out if that's all right?
It's on Cynnal Cymru's website, so the living wage for Wales, the real living wage, not the national.
The real living wage, that's the difference, just to be clear. Panel, I'm conscious of time. Are you happy if we move on to the next question of the line? So the second question, delegates, I'm going to share with the panel is, if we had a strategy or vision for procurement in Wales based on the WFG Act, which means that procurement was delivered wider value for Wales, what would it look like? So it makes sense I start off with you, doesn't it?
It does, it does. And I mean, hopefully, you know, the discussion we've had over the last 30 minutes has given people a bit of a flavour around this already. So apologies if I'm kind of repeating myself here, but for me, I think if we had a vision based on the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, we would be able to clearly articulate how, through thinking about procurement and the procurement decisions that we're making day to day, and how we're commissioning services, how we do that in a way that clearly follows the 5 ways of working within the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. So I've mentioned them already, but just to repeat, it's about thinking about the long term, it's about preventing, it's about integration, collaboration and involvement. And then when we've done that, I think we need to think again about how the outcomes that we want to achieve through these procurement decisions can maximise contribution to the 7 national wellbeing goals. And again, that we have a much greater focus on the outcomes that we want to achieve rather than the process that we need to follow through the way we do procurement. Because I think as the years have gone on, there has been a tendency to focus far too much on the process, on the procurement, you know, the different stages of the procurement cycle. And I think people tend to sort of get stuck on that hamster wheel of needing to go through that process and tend to sort of lose sight of what the outcomes that they could achieve through thinking about this differently, and also the point that we've already raised around not just focusing on short-term costs, but really thinking about the wider value that can be achieved. So, you know, I really hope that people don't see the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act as something that, you know, another thing that they have to do, another thing they have to comply with, you know, another, you know, tick box approach, but they really see it as a valuable framework to help them think differently and make decisions differently. We've published some resources on our website, so our Future Generations Framework helps public bodies to work through the Act. In our evidence to the Public Accounts Committee earlier in the year, we set out some ideas around how procurement can follow the 5 ways of working and think about the 7 wellbeing goals. So I'm happy to sort of share those with people after this webinar.
We'll make sure that link that Irgan was talking about is shared with you so you can have a read of that. Panel, I'm just letting you know that sort of there's some governance questions going to be coming up in this one. I mentioned earlier on we had a couple of questions already in. There's a further 3 coming in. So I think governance structures is something that's obviously concerning our delegates who are listening today. If you've got any more questions on governance, please can you post them now for me, so because I'll share them with the panel if that's right. So Neil, what would your response be to that?
I think what we need to think about is procurement as one tool within a range of other tools in terms of wider aspirations and well-being. And I think for procurement to be effective, or for wider well-being to be delivered, I think we need to also think about supply into the procurement market, into that what's commissioned. So we need to think about, it's all well thinking you want to procure locally or procure from a social enterprise or an organisation that has the right values, but there might not be the supply there. So how do you actually animate supply in terms of social enterprises, co-ops and other forms of it? So we need to think about supply too. There's also consideration of workforce in the public sector itself. So how do we make sure that there's decent terms and conditions for all direct employment, but also through supply as well? How do we make sure there's living wage, progressive employment, all those things as regards the workforce? And also, we should be thinking about land property investments. What is our public bodies, what land and property holdings they have? How do they make sure that benefits local community? How do you ensure that's developing well-being? Where are they investing their pension money in? Is it in fags and nuclear warheads on Dubai, or is it in the valleys? So I think we need to see procurement as one important lever, one important tool within a wider sort of mix, if you like, of advancing well-being. My own organisation calls that wealth building, and there'll be information on the website around that. But whatever you call it, I think we need to see procurement as something as one aspect of a wider array of activities that create social and economic justice, that build well-being, that create local wealth. And I think if we just focus on procurement, and isolate it, then I think we're missing a much wider trend of what we can do with the power of the democratic pound.
That's a great response. Thanks very much for that. Just for me to be sure, Gito, can you tweet out? It's called Wealth. What?
Yeah, it's local wealth building, and it's on the CLES website. There's pages on that.
Okay, we'll pick that up now and share. Thanks very much. Mary, do you mind doing that one, maybe?
Yeah. Everything Neil's just said, I think it was going to be my vision really to build stronger local economies, and I think the National Procurement Service has said that every pound spent in Wales, we should do our best to make sure it stays in Wales. But I think we all have a responsibility to do that. And as Neil said about the supply, I think there's an opportunity to ensure that we've got the right supply chain as well, and we take responsibility for supporting smaller organisations to come together to deliver. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the public service boards and the 44 public bodies have a part to play in that, as do the private sector anchor institutions in Wales as well. I think we've all got a responsibility to try and keep our wealth in Wales, and we're only going to do that by coming up with new ways of working. And I think, touching on governance, but I think flexibility, I think we need to ensure there's flexibility in procurement policies to deliver hyper-local solutions when they're needed as well. And I know sometimes frameworks are set and they don't allow for that. And I think there's an opportunity missed there. So I think there's new ways of working, but my vision is that they all come together to make sure we've got stronger local economies in Wales and a stronger supply chain.
Okay, thank you. Neil, Mary, some questions coming in on the governance now then. So I'm going to pick up about 2 or 3 of the governance questions. I quickly read through the questions. I'm trying to choose 2 or 3 that can reflect the overview, if that's all right. There's different elements, panel, okay? So I'll read them slowly for you so to have a time to think about. Several people are talking about how current procurement structures are hindering progress of sustainable procurement. Does the panel have any suggestions, or do any of your organisations that you represent that are members of your member organisations of Cyngor Cymru, of organisations that are currently trying to make this work? Does anyone have any examples as well to the panel about stuff that's done on a national level, at a local level, or PSB level? They're asking as well. There's that one. Right, let me go to the other one on procurement. Where are we here? Gosh, we've got so many on procurement here. Where are we? We'll go on that one for now, if I may, and I'll go and have a quick search for where I've put the other one. I thought I'd bookmarked them carefully, but clearly I haven't, so bear with me. So, Neil, do you want to come on that one, and Mary, do you want to come on afterwards, if that's okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think in governance, there's always again a danger of procrastination around governance, really, isn't there? And you know, I'm kind of a person that believes form follows function, and that we shouldn't kind of think about form before we've kind of isolated doing something progressive. And lessons from our work, I suppose, across the UK, that's the UK and Europe, is that we've got things like Public Service Board or anchor networks or partnership bodies that have these kind of conversations. It strikes me that they always work best when there's a very singular, two things. Firstly, there's somebody around that table who's doing it progressively. So that can infect others. So it's like, they're not waiting for the slowest, and then nothing get done. They're actually somebody saying, I'm going to do that. I'm going to look at my spend. I'm going to be progressive. I'm going to have a good framework. I'm going to do it. And then they bring that to the table, if you like, and it infects others. And the second thing is that across those kind of partnership bodies, there's a unified sense of purpose around well-being and the goals, and there's a kind of confluence around that, and there's a volition to do to advance progressively in that area. And I think place is a good vehicle for this. I think that's where the scale of Carnarvon or Newport, or the scale of place is a natural glue for people to think, I want to do good by Newport because I'm in Newport. And those anchors and all those bodies are there saying, right, we've got our corporate goals. We've also got a duty to serve the people of Newport. How can I do something different here? So there's two things. Firstly, to showcase somebody taking the lead in doing it, and also this using the power of place to convene a real sense of purpose in those partnership bodies. What I certainly would not recommend is some new progressive procurement board.
Okay.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
We use the architecture we've got. And if we don't have an architecture, then somebody just gets on and does it, and hopefully affects people in other ways.
Before I come to you, Mary, I found the second question I wanted to raise. There's also sort of where they wanted clarity. Are you talking about a national level? Are you talking about a local level in terms of your approach, Neil? And I'm getting the senses this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. I think that's what you're trying to ask us here. You're not. Are you asking the question that it must be a one-size-fits-all approach? Because if that's the case, that's a definite no-no from me straight away. But I'll come back to you on that one in a minute. I'm going to bring Mary in if that's all right. Okay.
Yeah, I think going back to the place-based focus, I think that is something that we're working with a lot of our member organisations on. A couple of our members do procurement brilliantly, but it's a very top-down organisations that have grown in size over time, who've had progressive thinkers there from the beginning, and they're leading the way now. They've got a local supply chain that they're supporting, so they've got it right for their own industry. And as Ina said, it's not a one-size-fits-all. But I do think that you do have to look at the places you're working in, and I think we have to enable that flexibility is built into any framework, which allows us to work locally as well. If you're going into Newport and delivering a project or a contract in Newport, then working with local suppliers, working with the local printers, or working with the local caterers, if you've got that flexibility, it'll enrich your project, it'll give more trust in your organisation from the community, it'll maybe speed things along because of the learning you'll have from working very closely on the ground in a meaningful way with people. I think the place-based approach is key to doing things well. And on top of that, a bit of a sidetrack, I think going in and delivering community benefits, a couple of organisations that we work with are now changing the way they do that. They're not going in and doing things to communities, they're doing things with them. So they're having that dialogue. They're having events with the seldom heard voices. They're trying to bring in different community groups and individuals to feed back into the process, so that they're giving a community the benefits that they need as opposed to what that organisation thinks they need.
Mary, diolch yn hyfryd, diolch yn fawr am hynny. Irgan, do you want to share your thoughts on this one?
I can do. I think too often in Wales we can get a bit too hung up on governance, to be honest, and that everything has to be sort of perfected at that level for things to happen underneath. I think, again, evidence that the Commissioner submitted to the Public Accounts Committee inquiry earlier in the year, we included some points of feedback that we'd had from our discussions with public bodies around procurement over the last few months, and I was quite distressed by the feedback that I'm getting from them. So I think it is quite a hard structure to work within at the moment. So I'll just read out some of the points that we included. That there's a lot of people see procurement as a blocker rather than an enabler. It's very much a transactional thing rather than a transformational process. The legislative framework is constraining. The procurement landscape is complex, uncoordinated, difficult to navigate, with all these potentially acting as a barrier to change. So I think the feeling we get from people working in the procurement profession is that they're very much constrained by all these requirements on them, and it's very difficult for them to sort of take a step back and start doing things differently, because there needs to be such a whole-scale system change. So I think, again, rather than kind of focusing on governance, it is about looking at the opportunities, be they place-based or organisational-based, and just sort of scale, stripping things back and thinking, if we start with a really simple approach to this, what would that look like? Just really, make it a lot simpler than it is. And I think, again, the other thing that we lack maybe in Wales in terms of procurement is a mechanism to bring people together to talk about this, to share learning. As far as I'm aware, there isn't really a network. I know there are procurement boards and different sort of bodies that represent
networks for procurement officers.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But even in their silos, so I think there's a local
exactly
authority network. There might be a health procurement network. And
let's ask the question.
I'm sure there's an opportunity there to.
Is there one? I will bring you in. Sorry. I can see you're chomping at the bit to come in. I'm not ignoring you, but I'd just like to bring everyone in here.
Sorry.
Is anyone aware of a network out there that's not just for procurement officers, but procurement officers are part of in a more wider well-being element aspect of it? That reflects us been reflecting what the panel's been saying. If it is, please let us know, because we'd love to share that, wouldn't we, folks? Okay, right, sir.
I just had some examples of
the
question asked about, are we aware of any local examples? So I know in Ceredigion that they have set up a procurement forum there that brings the procurement people from the different public bodies within the Ceredigion area together, and they're looking to work together to see what can be achieved in procurement. And the same for Caffael as well, the Public Service Board. Has procurement as a key priority across the PSB organisation, so they've just started to look at what can be done by working together in their local area. So I think that's really positive. To see
can we share that? That's part of the evidence that you've put forward.
No, that's happening since. So,
right, great. That's good news.
Yeah.
Should we share that afterwards? And if that's all right,
sure.
you can both contact details. Great, thanks for those two. So that's Ceredigion and Caffael. Thank you very much. Hello, Ceredigion and Caffael. Okay, Neil, sorry.
No, sorry for trying to butt in there.
No problem.
I said at the outset, or we all said at the outset, that this is about behaviour change.
Yes.
And I think in terms of intra-organisations, there's two things that you could do that would seek to change the behaviour of procurement. And I'm a big fan of kind of disrupting, if you like, governance and disrupting systems. And one of the things we recommend, and it's starting to happen in England and Scotland to an extent, is we say procurement departments is an economic development function.
Ooh.
So
can you say that again slowly?
Procurement is an economic development function. At the moment, it's a financial function, by and large. So we say corporately centre procurement and make it an arm of economic development. Because what's more important in terms of like what we're talking about in terms of wider economic and social aims, if it's part of economic development, straight away, it's not seen as just a technical exercise. It's seen as a key lever that a local authority would, a key economic development aim of a local authority. So I would say every single Welsh Local Government Association, the Welsh Government, individual local authorities should bring procurement and place it right in the heart of economic development, and it would change behaviour straight away. And secondly, I would say the Welsh Government should put procurement in its economic policy department or unit.
Wow. Okay.
Because that again is one of the biggest levers, and we've got £6 billion to spend on goods and services, £14 billion across the whole of Welsh Government expenditure. It seems to me that if you put procurement inside the economic policy, we'd change behaviours in the natural course of events, because those procurement people would be having conversation about economic.
I have to ask this question. I'm putting this question back out to you folks. Is that happening anywhere out here? Please let us know. Also, Neil, following on from your question, because you work across the UK, are there any examples coming from Northern Ireland, Scotland or England that you would want to share about in terms of where the people have been progressive or done these behaviour changes that you've made several references to?
Yeah, there's a lot on our website there. Of course, Preston has recently been given lots of airplay, and that's a 6-year-old project. We've been doing this for 12 years. So Manchester City Council, we're now working in Birmingham. There's an event next week around Birmingham at Progressive Procurement. There's Kirklees, Calderdale, Islington, Southampton, Wakefield. I'll be annoying somebody by not mentioning them. There's also a pilot project in Scotland that's getting set up around this activity. I'd also, bear with me, I'd like to mention the work that we're doing with the Health Foundation.
Yes,
and the Health Foundation and the Democracy Collaborative, a US-based think tank, looking at the role of health institutions in England as anchors, and to try and look at how they spend their resource and how it benefits the local economy for local well-being ends. The hypothesis says that health expenditure should look at the wider social and economic, environmental, cultural determinants of ill health. And if we can unlock the supply chain of hospitals, we see there could be a wider benefit. So that's a really important bit of work that touches on the £140 billion of health money.
Absolutely. Panel, I'm very conscious of time, and I've been given the nod from behind the camera that I need to move on. So move on we will. So thank you for the responses to that part. So third question, it's about opportunity here, folks. What are the key opportunities to do procurement differently? Actually, do you know what? I'm going to say progressive, sustainable procurement differently. I'm converted now. and encouraging a different mindset. Mari, can I start with you?
Yeah.
That was a bit of Wenglish, sorry about that.
I think we've got, as we've all said from the outset, the framework now to do things differently with the Act is giving us permission to do things differently. I think there's an opportunity to work more in partnership that hasn't been done in any meaningful way before, to procure better, but also to build a better supply chain to try and keep the money in Wales. I think there's an opportunity to take responsibility for our communities. And again, going back to the living wage, I do feel it's really important that to build strong local economies, everyone in any supply chain should be paid a decent wage for a decent hour's work. And I think that the organisations paying for contracts need to take responsibility for that. I think that we've got to start changing the way we work now, and it doesn't matter if we fail, but as long as we fail fast and learn from it. Well, I've been inspired by the way one of our members is working on a project in a very small location as a pilot. Welsh Water are looking at the Rhondda Fach, and they've embedded a behaviour change in their whole organisation where they're getting the staff to co-produce a different way of working. And not just that, they're getting people and communities involved in co-producing the solutions as well. And I think that is truly inspiring and is informing. It's such a learning process for the staff, the senior management and the communities, and it's building trust. I think there's huge opportunities to do a lot of things differently.
Absolutely. Thank you. Neil, the opportunities here.
I think there's amazing opportunities in Wales, isn't there? You've got a great Act.
You're a bit jealous of this Act, aren't you?
Aye. Well, yeah, I'm jealous, but then I've got my doubts about legislation as a whole. But yeah, I think the Act is great. You've got great people you've got great, there's acumen and skills. So you've got a good act, you've got clever people, you've got some people that've got the bit between the teeth on this. And also, it's not been talked about before, look at all the splendour you've got in terms of the localities and that place identity and the affiliation with place, this land of many small towns and places, isn't it? And each place will have its own identity and people wanting to goodbye it, and so that all adds up to quite a heady brew in terms of what we can do with our own democratic pound and how we make that virtuous.
I have to say, a heady brew is not an expression I've heard before. You heard it here, folks. I think it's a fabulous expression.
So it strikes me, what then, we've got all that ingredients of this heady brew. What makes us drink it and get really intoxicated by it? It seems to me there is elements of bureaucracy that need to be folded away in this. There's somebody that needs to stick their head above the parapet and go hell for leather on it, and that means individual localities and individual organisations who really show the way. I think there is a sense in Wales, isn't it, where they're kind of thinking, oh, we've tried it and we won't work this time, or there's a kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Lack of confidence, perhaps that's it again. That's maybe a lack of confidence, and I think there is a need to kind of be more bullish in confidence. You've got all the ingredients, you've got this heady brew to be drunk. You've just go ahead and do it. And no, is there anybody you just need to ask permission? All the platforms are there. Just get on.
Absolutely.
The Act gives you permission, I think.
Absolutely. We've got progressive, we got permission. What's your P?
What's my P?
I'll give you time to have a think about that, folks. And
What is your
You have sense on the
absolutely. Right. So, sorry.
Passion.
Passion.
Yay! So we've got permission, progressive, and passion. Well, good recovery there. Well done, girl. Well done. Okay. I need to get your response to the question in terms of about. So the third question was. That's it, really, isn't it? But what are the key opportunities to do progressive, passionate, permissible procurement differently?
Yeah.
I know that was a heady question. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I know.
I think, procurement, people out there in procurement, they need to be brave. I think they have got passion. I think, that they get the Act. A lot of people I've spoken to, majority of people I've spoken to really understand the Act. They see it as an opportunity. And they just, I think they just need to be brave, try a few different things and just see what happens, really. Taking well-managed risks, obviously, but as Neil suggested, maybe a few people need to put their heads above the parapet and see how through using the framework that's provided by the Act. The 5 ways of working, I've already talked about how they can work together, not just within their organisations, but with their supply chains and engaging with that sector. Taking a long-term approach, having a far greater focus on outcomes rather than process.
Can I just share with the delegates in terms of, we had a recent webinar where moving from outputs to outcomes. Gito, I think might be a good idea if we can share that link out of that webinar, if that's all right. Sorry, didn't mean to cut across you there.
No, that's fine. And I guess, the whole idea of having a better understanding of what your organisation spends its money on. I was quite surprised again to see the reports that came through last year and again through the Public Accounts Committee that there wasn't much clarity around what organisations spend their money on and how they use that to make better decisions around procurement. So if you are looking for an area to take forward, maybe have a look at your spend analysis and either go for something fairly substantial or something that you can influence in terms of opportunities to change and just just try something different.
Lovely, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, panel. I'm going to have to read out a number of different comments that's coming through. Thank you very much, folks, for your comments. I'm going to read about 3 or 4 that have come through. And panel, if you'd like to share an observation maybe on 1 or 2 of them. The first one is, the trick is to translate talk into action. How do we do that? I'll give you time to have a think about that. There's a good practice example come through here. Example of good practice, bisocial in Northern Ireland. Bisocial includes targeted recruitment and training opportunities, as well as wider social value clauses on public construction, ICT and services contract. Let me check the next one. There are currently 84 live bisocial contracts through bisocial. 550 people who were long-term employed or had no substantial work experience have been able to access a job opportunity, which is lovely. Thank you for that. Thank you for these comments. We will copy and paste them and share them with everyone if that's okay. Where's this next one? My experience is it's getting more and more technical. I'm assuming we're talking about procurement here. So I've chosen 3 or 4 there just to give a sort of a flavour. Any thoughts or observations on what you've just heard in terms of bisocial Northern Ireland, moving from the talk to the action, and sort of the technical element of it? Do you want to take one each, if that's all right?
I'd just like to say quickly about the talk to action. I think it's easy to, and it's not just excuses sometimes, but to put barriers up in front of us to say we can't do anything because it's policies or it's not our responsibility. I think we all have responsibility and we can all act now if we choose to. We can all influence things, and I think we can all bring other people into the conversation. And that's how we get change. I think it is by stopping talking and starting to do something about it. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I think the biggest changes happen when people don't act within sort of the rules that confine other people or the rules people see around them, and they just do the right thing. And I think it's having brave individuals just to go out now this afternoon and start putting into action some of the ideas or bringing conversations to people to get things moving. I think it's easy to act.
So are you saying, Mariatha, it's better to seek forgiveness rather than approval?
I always seek forgiveness rather than approval.
I thought you might have said that. Thank you. I hope that was a nice way to conclude what you were trying to say. Thank you. Okay, Neil, those 3 observations that have been shared, quite wide, quite varied. Which one would you like to pick up on for you?
I suppose the bisocial and Northern Ireland, I think I'm familiar with that, and I think it is a good thing to think about, and I think it's important that we consider that, how you think about that social purchase. But there's a wider economic ecosystem, I suppose, we need to think about post that purchase that's social. And so I think it's got, again, it's one part of the one part of the kind of picture here that we need to focus on. On the talk to action, I think evidence and showcase is important here. I think that's, I would love to see a directory in Wales that's your directory of progressive procurement, a directory of sustainable procurement, and just little songs, little vignettes of all the great stuff that's happening even before the act, even before all this conversation. And that is a great way, I think, of just getting people to think, I can do that too. So that would get us away from the talk into the action, because we'd see the action, and then others could do that as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
I'd like to share an example. We've been quite impressed by the work that Transport for Wales have done over the last 18 months. So again, through the competitive dialogue process that they've been going through to procure the new rail franchise for Wales, and also the company that will build the new metro for South East Wales. So they've been quite clear from the very beginning that they wanted to use the framework of the Act. So how can they follow the 5 ways of working, and they can think about the 7 wellbeing goals? So that, that has been a very long process. The competitive dialogue process is an interesting one, because it involves working very closely with the bidders and allowing them to come up with the solutions for the actual scheme itself. And obviously, I think it's one of the biggest procurement exercises that's happened in Wales ever. So we've been really pleased by the approach they've taken, the range of organisations they've worked with and talked to. And actually, we had a conversation with with a company that's won that contract, Keolis Amy, and they came to speak to us about their ambitions for the franchise in the Metro. And they're very much looking at outcomes that align to the 7 wellbeing goals, which I can show my colleagues here.
Thank you.
That they shared with us. So in terms of looking at creating new jobs in Wales, 50% of the trains will be built and assembled in Wales, and so they've literally looked at all the 7 wellbeing goals and looked at how they can contribute to all of them. So it can be done, and I realise that that is a particularly large contract to give an example of.
But as we've said before, this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about adapting, not adopting, isn't it? This might be a good idea at a time for you to give a shout out to the art of the possible, really, wouldn't it, in some ways?
I can do, yes. Yeah. We have a 12-month piece of work happening in the Office of the Future Generations Commissioner called The Art of the Possible, where we're working in partnership with a range of organisations that have seconded staff in to help us to develop resources that will help public bodies better understand each of the 7 wellbeing goals. And they're working on those resources right now, and we'll be able to share those with colleagues and external organisations over the next 6 months. The idea being that we start with some simple changes that public bodies can adopt into the 7 wellbeing goals, and then we encourage them to be a bit more ambitious and to look at developing and improving their ideas over the coming years around those 7 wellbeing goals.
That's really good. That's
yeah,
lovely.
more information to hopefully be out there shortly.
Lovely, thanks. And we'll make sure that we'll share all that with you. What will happen is that Michelle, who once we've got this this webinar transcribed and translated, we'll send you out the links, and Michelle will send that to you at the same time, if that's okay. I'm conscious of time, folks. One last observation coming through that I want to share, because I think it would be rude not to share this one in many ways, because it's the reality that a number of people listening in are experiencing. Cultural dimension in public bodies, in brackets, I know from experience, direct and indirectly, means that people are risk averse. So this includes progressive sustainable procurement. That's an observation. It's a reality. Any observations you care to share back to the delegates in terms of the risk adverse culture element?
Well, just linking to that and picking up on what Neil said about having some kind of directory where you can share examples of what else has been done. We have, on a very small scale, we've got the Sustainable Academy Awards that we do every year, and we ask organisations, large and small, public, private, third sector, to give examples over the last 12 months of what they've done in the framework of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and how that's moving Wales procurement and sustainability forward. So there is that online, which can show examples and very inspiring examples as well of what's going on across all sectors.
Gito, can you get the link for Canal Cymru Sustainable Academy Awards from this year and last year, if you like, because there's some really fascinating approaches. One of the last observations I needed to share, Neil, was about its cultural dimension in public bodies. I know from experience, direct and indirect, means that people are risk averse. This includes progressive sustainable procurement. Any observations to share back on this? Because we're talking about this risk averse of cultural element within organisations.
I think there is a risk averse culture. I think the tone or the beat that needs to be struck on this is from national politicians and other leaders, that it's okay to take risks. I think if we don't see it as risk, but see it as more of experimentation and creating mechanisms where we can isolate things so risk is managed. So it could be, for instance, that one looks at a location. as a whole, as a pilot test case for progressive procurement across a whole range of agencies that are in that locality. So it could be the police, the health, the whole range of organisations. And that we kind of box it off, so it'd be less risky. I think if you're trying to do things, and it's linked to the governance point and where we start, if you think about a big strategy and everyone's got to do it, then that seems like an awful big risk. But if you're kind of isolated by place, I think that's the way. But we do need to create experimentation and people that stick in the head above the parapet.
Absolutely.
And we need to get over that. And the way to do it is to box it off, I think.
I think I can help a little towards this. Our current Auditor General, Hugh Vaughan-Thomas, throughout the whole of his 8 years of his tenureship, has said that current public services cannot currently continue in the same format. It's just not financially possible. He wants public services to innovate, and he recognises that public services they have to take well-managed risks. And as long as those well-managed risks, those risks are well managed, should things not work out the way you hope to do, he's more likely to share the learning through events like this rather than come down on a heavy report. And we have a video of him saying this. So, Gito, can you please share that out on Twitter for it? Because he is absolutely passionate about recognising sort of that public services have to innovate, but also equally recognises the reality of it. You know, it does take risk. And so as long as it's well managed, he's more likely to share the learning as through events like this. So we'll send out that video if you like. Panel, imagine you're sitting, listening into this webinar now and say, okay, right, so what can I do now? Leaving this webinar, what could I practically do later on today or tomorrow morning in terms of this topic? Could I have one practical example from you? We've talked about kickstarting small steps. So just what's the one thing you tell delegates to do, start off this process? Because I'm trying to be the delegate that's sitting out there. So I'm going to put you in, right, okay, let's see the colour of your money now then, young Neil. So what would you say? What's the one thing that you start doing? It's easy if you go first. That means you might nick what other people are saying. So I know I put you on the spot, but it means
if you're someone who's, say, in charge of an organisation or department, you should see procurement not as a technical exercise, but as a key part of your goals as a public service.
Okay.
So it's and if you're a local authority person, particularly, or a chief exec or a leader of a local authority, you should be saying, let's put procurement central, corporately central in this organisation, possibly part of economic development.
So this webinar is being filmed. So you can play this back at your next team meeting. You've heard it from Neil. Thank you, Neil. That was a lovely one. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I think it would be, just have a look at the opportunities, really. Talk to your team, be they, your procurement team, or if you're based in different departments, talk to, other teams, but really just sit down and think, so, if we are going to do something, differently over the next 6 months, exactly what could that be? What could it look like? And really try and pin down something specific that you can do to change that.
Caffael and Ceredigion started somewhere, didn't they? They have. Yeah. Thank you. Mary, last but not least.
For me, I think it's finding a way of embedding your organisation into the communities you touch through your work. There are a number of ways of doing that, a number of simple ways of doing that. We've talked about governance and putting people on boards in third sector organisations. We've talked about making sure that everyone gets a fair wage. But I think if you get different people in different departments in your organisations to embed themselves in communities, they'll all feel a responsibility for doing things differently and doing things better. And it'll be a more of a natural DNA change, I think, a culture change within an organisation. So I think it's finding the ways that are right for you to embed your organisation in the communities you work with.
So 3 thanks now. thanks to you, the delegates, for some great questions. I know the panel have felt a little bit uncomfortable with some of the questions, but thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks to the team behind the camera. Michelle, Guto, Sarah, diolch yn fawr i chi. Thank you very much indeed. Panel members, diolch yn fawr. Thank you very, very, very much. Great responses. I'm sorry if I've pressured you to get some responses out. Really appreciate it. So, folks, it's over to you now. Today was the start of the journey in terms of progressive, sustainable procurement. Where do you want to go next? We are just starting at this point now to pull together our programme, that's the Good Practice Exchange Full programme for next financial year. What topic do you want? What element do you want that can help you move this forward? Please use this webinar to share with colleagues as part of your training and development, your learning and development. It'll be freely available on our YouTube, that's the Wales Audit Office YouTube account, in about a fortnight. Michelle will share that with you. It's just about a fortnight we should be getting it out to you. Please share that widely. But more importantly, please, what's the next topic? We're trying to live and breathe the 5 ways of working in terms of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Where do you want to go next? We're involving you. Take this opportunity and tell us where you want to go next. Thank you. So this is Ina Lloyd on behalf of the Good Practice team saying thank you very much for a really engaging afternoon. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Hwyl fawr a diolch.